Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Authority's Board's Finance and Audit Committee meeting for November the 17th. Mr. Secretary, if the record will reflect that committee members, Directors Gilmetti and Camacho are with us, and we have a quorum. And with that, we'll move to public comments. If you can, Mr. Secretary, explain to the public how they can address us.
Thank you, Chair Richards. Good morning, all. Welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Finance and Audit Committee meeting. In a moment, we'll begin to take public comment. First, we'd like to run through some important technical aspects of the meeting for offering public comment. If you are logging into the meeting via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature, typically located at the bottom of your screen, so that I can call on you to provide your comment. If you're dialing in by phone, press #2. This will raise your hand and put you into the queue. Speakers will be called on in the order that their hand is raised. Once you have been in the queue, your name is called in the web meeting. Please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. On the phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you'll hear a message that you are being unmuted. Once unmuted, it will be your turn to speak. Please slowly and clearly say and spell your first and last name. If applicable, state the organization you represent. After your introduction, each speaker is allowed 2 minutes to provide their comment. I will interject in 1 minute and 45 seconds to provide a 15-second warning. Our court reporter is on the line to record those comments. If they need you to spell or repeat something, they may interject. I will notify you when your time is nearly up. At the end of your comment, we will disable your microphone. However, you are welcome to stay on the line to continue watching or listening to the meeting. If you do not wish to provide comment and simply want to watch the meeting, you can do so by logging on to hsr.ca.gov and looking for the link of our live stream. Chair? Okay. At this time, we have 2 public comments. Pardon me.
Looks like we can start with Roland.
Yeah. Roland. Okay. Good morning, Roland. Roland, good morning.
Good morning, Chair Richards and directors. This is Roland in San Jose. This morning, I'd like to share concerns about the amount of remaining contingency in the Central Valley report as follows. Page 6 shows a $1.4 billion drop across all CPs in 1 year, including a drop of $650 million for CP1, which will be down to $280 million on page 16, and a drop of $700 million for CP23, which will be down to 0 next month on page 25. In closing, I hope that we can have a frank and honest discussion about this situation later in the agenda, including how growth on contingency could possibly have been allowed to approach 40% of the $10 billion expended on this project so far, instead of 20% as originally planned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. Our next speaker is Blair Beekman.
Good morning, Blair.
Hello, Blair Beekman here. I've attended a few public meetings here in the past. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm interested, I'm working towards better openness and accountability with the future of local community technology practices, the surveillance and data collection. It's really interesting work that invites a real open, public democratic process. All parts of a community can be involved in the future of tech being placed in their neighborhood. It's interesting work. So I'm learning, I'm new. So I'm learning how to be a part of the process. And I've noticed that, you're building new train systems in the Livermore Valley area that are those running counterintuitive to what could be, a straight line system, possibly a BART from Dublin Pleasanton into the future of, say, Tracy, into the Central Valley, and possibly BART's learning to run from Richmond up to Sacramento. Are those honest choices that we have for the future of high-speed rail in California and how it will connect with the Bay Area? I'm not fully sure. BART goes back and forth on that. They can be very adamantly that they don't work that way. But it just seems a really clear way to help the process. And I'm very much for not just centralizing help for the future of San Jose and how high-speed rail can work through San Jose, but how high-speed rail can really connect to all parts of the Bay Area, to the East Bay. And it can be a fully inclusive process if we're open and want to talk.
Seconds?
Sure. If we want to be open and talk in those good terms, it doesn't have to be competitive. And that's what I'm trying to work towards. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for your interest in the project. I'd encourage you to spend as much time as you can on our website. I think a number of those things that you've raised would be clearer after you have done so, but we appreciate your interest in the time you take to address us.
Mr. Secretary. Mr. Chairman, at this time, we have no other attendees have joined the meeting, and we have no more public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, we'll move on. You noticed something's wrong with my voice this morning, so for that I apologize, and it wasn't too much singing last night. At any rate, moving on to item number 1 is consideration of the committee minutes from October the 20th.
Move approval.
Okay, I want a motion for approval. Director Camacho. Second. Okay, thank you. We have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. With regards to any comments, I just want to mention and ask for some opinion of my colleagues on the committee. You've noticed in the board agenda for today that we have a more detailed and in-depth analysis of the Central Valley progress, and I'm going to ask you if you would support not doing that in this meeting this morning. That would be section 10 of our package, but rather if only to address any questions that you may have for Mr. Horgan with regards to anything that you may have noted in section 10 that you'd like to have addressed now. If there is, in the absence of those things, then we'll not take on the Central Valley update today, but rather wait for the board meeting at 11 o'clock. So with that, we'll move on to section 3, the executive summary from our Chief Financial Officer. And Brian, before you get started on that, with regards to a request from last month, we were going to get a presentation on equity issues. Is that being taken care of today? I didn't see it on the agenda.
Yeah, our Chief of Communications, Melissa Figueroa, sent an email a day or two ago to the board members with an update, and she was suggesting, I believe in that we would have benchmarks completed by January and expected all of the audit recommendations to be implemented by the end of February. But she'd suggested in that email that if she comes back and briefs the board after the benchmarks are established, that might be more productive for the board.
Yeah, well, this was a request by this committee and not the board. So I'm okay with that, but I would have preferred whatever we had asked for last month to have been addressed today. Okay, all right, go ahead with your report.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
would it be possible for Melissa to come back and report to us in December?
it certainly would be appropriate, I think, from our perspective, from this committee's perspective. When we asked the question last month, I assume Mr. Annis, with the response that Melissa gave us, that she was prepared to do this in front of this committee this month.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, Melissa did send an email to the F&A committee members articulating the work that she has underway right now on the DE&I task force that we set up. And she noted in that email that there were benchmarks that we were getting to that she thought would be better to run to ground and then update the board in January once those are in place. She sent that, I think, 2 days ago. So that's why she's not presenting today. But again, we can come back in December if you want to do an interim update before the benchmarks are complete.
Yeah. Is she going to be ready for that in December, or is the schedule now?
I mean, what I recall, Director Gilmetti raising at the last F&A is what is the timetable for us to work this task force. I think that's something we can discuss. The whole plan with the task force is to get a series of recommendations in place.
Yeah.
We consider putting into policy here at the authority. And I think we can certainly lay that out in December. Other specific benchmarks, I think we're waiting for those to be complete through the process she has underway and come back and inform the board of those in January when they're done. But we can do an interim update in December. Problem.
Jim?
Well, I was just concerned that she comes before the F&A, whether it's December or January, as long as she comes back and talks.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. The plan is to come back to this committee, not the full board.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Yes, that's absolutely what we're doing.
Okay.
Both you and Brian Annis were saying the board, so that's why we were.
It's this committee. Sorry, it's the F&A, and her email was to this committee.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Brian, you're up.
All right. All right. So providing the finance office update, and what you're seeing on the screen is our first page. It starts with our accounts payable or record of payments we made during the reporting month of September. As you can see, we had, again, no late payments. We have a record now of 68 months without a late payment. We also report disputes. Our record of disputes indicates an increase of about 7.1 million to a new total of 130 million. Over 99% of these disputes are all related to a single contract, and that's the CP23 Dragados contract. And as discussed previously, sometimes that contractor does submit invoices for work that's still being negotiated, or issues that are still being negotiated. So that's not a change, but again, that's the reason why the disputes have gone up over the past year. At the bottom of the page, we show our cash management report, and couple updates by fund to provide there. Our Prop 1A cash balance fell by about 21.2 million to a new total of 41.5 million. There was no inflow during the month of September due to bond sales or commercial paper sales, so that was just an expenditure of the balance. Similar for cap and trade, the balance fell by about 96.3 million to a total of 1,822 million. That is, again, no inflow of new revenues, only an outflow of payments for that month. We had been estimating that the August cap and trade auction would net for the authority $160.7 million. We did receive that allocation last week, and it was higher than we were expecting, but it turns out to just be a temporary issue. We were credited $205 million from the August auction through the Department of Finance. However, that is because the Department of Finance deferred one of the what we call off the top transfers they typically do out of August proceeds, but they deferred about a $50 million offset, we think now, to the November auction. So again, while this reflects higher revenues from the August auction by about 45 million, we do expect, that amount will be reduced from the November auction. And speaking of the November auction, that did occur yesterday, and we expect to receive the cap and trade preliminary results from that auction next Wednesday. So we will notify the board when those auction results come out by, I should say Finance and Audit Committee, when we receive the preliminary results of the auction. And lastly, we have a small fund called the Rail Property Management Fund that right now is receiving primarily lease payments from authority property that has a tenant. And that balance is down slightly month over month. And the current total is $11.6 million. Right. Next slide, please.
Hold 1 second. Can we go back to the slide? The 68 months of no penalty payments is all well and fine, but I'm more concerned about the disputed invoices. We have 130 million disputed invoices. Sometimes will impact forward construction because of some dispute with whether or not work has been done. How are we doing with disputed invoices, and how long does it take us to get those resolved?
Well, again, our record, I guess I would say, put it in two categories. One is everything other than Dragados Flatiron is pretty good. That's a small amount of money that is everything else. I think it's in fact under $1 million. So everything else is very minor, and we're able to resolve quickly. Again, the issue with Dragados is they submit some contractor proposed change orders for some things that the authority might agree there's merit, but we're in the process of negotiating the appropriate amount. In other areas, they may include in an invoice something that we believe doesn't have merit, and it's a dispute. But again, some of these are being resolved with Dragados as we go. Some of them do relate to change orders that are being executed, and so then we do sometimes see a reduction in that Dragados cumulative dispute amount as well.
Well, do you find that work stops when we have a disputed invoice on terms of impacting our forward progress?
It shouldn't. I'd ask, I don't know if Daniel's on and wants to comment on that, but yeah.
The answer, Ernie, is no. We are working collaboratively with the contractors to resolve any of the issues.
Great.
But excuse me, what happens with regards to the process of settling the dispute, and do those disputes impact the budget? Or they do impact the budget, and so that means the resolution of the disputes, if we are paying more than was anticipated, then impacts our contingency fund.
Correct. That is correct. Although I would also say that, where we don't think a settlement is something we can reasonably achieve, we have not been bashful about going to arbitration. We have 5 issues in arbitration with Dragados now. We are undertaking, for purposes of moving forward the program, looking at mediation options for those 5 issues. So we do want to keep things moving. I would just say that I think you'll see in Brian's flash report a good example of how settling the issues equate to work moving along. And one of the areas the board is aware that we had a major settlement with Dragados at the Hanford Viaduct area, and that we had really advanced work in October at that site because we've moved through that issue and are working through the issue. And so work is progressing at that site, and you'll see a tick up in our expenditures for that work for October. I expect that to continue. We had the four big issues with Dragados, which we've talked to the board about at length. Three of those were resolved, and so work is progressing at those three areas. And one of them is moved to arbitration. But again, we expect to move work even in the one that is in arbitration. So we'll work through those issues as we go.
On the 130 million of disputed invoices, are any of those invoices as a result of the time delays? Or are they construction related?
I don't think those are in the 130, but I want to defer to Daniel or Brian.
Yeah. They're not related to the time impact, Ernie.
Okay. So they're all
Are
construction.
any of these disputes based upon the intent of Dragados to do a construction project in a certain way that was what they had proposed when they were responding to our procurement, and subsequently found that what they had intended on doing wasn't workable?
No, none of these are related to alternative technical concepts.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Brian, go ahead.
Sure, I believe we can move to the next slide. So this is a summary of our administrative budget. Monthly expenditures for September were 5.5 million. So for the first 3 months of the fiscal year, we're at 15.2 million. And so coming in a little under budget, if you will, which is to be expected given our vacancy rate, which is displayed at the bottom, by the way. I just note year over year, you see the progress. We've hired 45 filled positions since a year ago, bringing our vacancy rate from 34% down to 23.5%. Next slide. This is our capital outlay budget summary. So this shows our capital expenditures for the month of September were $74.4 million, which is up about 5 million month over month. In the middle of the page, we show the expenditure for each construction package, 15.1 million for CP1, 26.5 for 2.3, and 9.2 for CP4. We also, at the flash report, will give the numbers for October as well, which were up substantially, but I'll pause until we get to that page to give you the exact amount. So again, year to date, first 3 months of the fiscal year, at the bottom table displays the $211.2 million spent year to date through September. Next slide, please. So two charts on this page. At the top, our total expenditures since 2006, and it looks like the odometer is about to turn over here as we're $9,999.8 million. And again, most of that is construction, 76% construction, and then project development is the second largest category, 14%. At the bottom, we show all of our active grants from the federal government, and of course that list has grown in the past 12 months by the bottom two, the two raise grants. Not a lot to update here, although I will mention that the middle one, the EPA Brownfields grant, that's the smallest grant at $600,000. We've spent $451,000 through October. What I want to mention on this is there is an expiration of this grant, December 31st of this year. So we have been working, our grants manager, myself, accounting, WSP, have been working on how we can get as close to the full $600,000 as we can by the end of December. But the nature of the grant did have a hard expiration date, and that is December 31st of this year.
And Brian, on that brownfields, is that expenditure to date, meaning through the end of September or October?
That's through the end of September.
Thank you.
And this is primarily used in partnership with LA Metro, doing some brownfield work in Southern California around the Union Station facility.
Okay.
Brian, is that where it will be spent or attempted to be spent?
Yes, it's spent on, again, they're doing brownfield toxic studies, is my understanding, around that facility.
And is Metro aware of that it expires?
Yes. Yeah, so again, the remaining 149,000, we hope to get as close to zero as we can. And again, the team's been, I think, in expanding the type of expenditures so that we can meet that. Next slide, please. That's our contract and expenditures report. Not a lot of change here. The number of contracts the authority has active is unchanged at 216. Our total value of contracts is up a bit month over month due to executed change orders. Our small business utilization rate about the same. It looks like up 0.1% over the month, 0.2 year over year, and again about 7.2% up from when we started tracking this in 2015. Next slide, please. Contingency reporting. We break contingency here into two major categories on the top chart. So we list contingency balances that are specifically associated with each construction package 1 through 4. And the top right column shows what remains at the end of September. Hanford Viaduct's been mentioned a few times today. So that change order is not reflected. It was not executed in September, but it was executed in October. So in some of the flash report material in the Central Valley Progress Report, it does indicate our October use of contingency is going to total about $291 million. And so that $291 million will come out of that $977 million balance of the CP contingencies. And it looks like the number then for those issues would reduce the number to about $686 million. So we will be coming back to the board at some point with updated estimates here for the construction packages, as these contingencies are being utilized for those major change orders and smaller change orders as well that have been highlighted in past business plans. But for the month of September, again, no large change orders. The total of the small ones added to 17.2 million. And again, no single change orders over 25 million.
So excuse me, Brian. So are we, with regards to future use of contingency, is there the expectation that we will completely have utilized it and you would be coming back asking the board for an additional allocation for contingency?
That's correct.
And when do you think that's likely to happen?
Well, we're working on it now. Could be as early as next month, but I want to make sure we have solid numbers for you. But we are working on to see if we can get it ready for you by December.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So our preliminary numbers for October, As referenced, we did have a large jump here going from September to October. Total capital expenditures from 74 million to $122.5 million. Looking at the individual construction packages, CP1 was up a bit, but the major uptick was for CP23, going from 26.5 million to 60 million. And 30 million of that is related to the Hanford Viaduct change order being executed. The board may recall that we had done a $50 million time and materials change order for the Hanford Viaduct, I think about a half a year ago, to allow the contractor to get to work on that structure while the full change order was negotiated. That full change order was negotiated and executed in October. And with that, a $30 million amount was included in the invoice for the Hanford work that had been done really under the provisions of the time and material change order. But again, that with the execution of the full change order, that $50 million time and materials change orders will be canceled. And instead the billing is coming in under the new executed change order. And that resulted in a bit of an accumulated amount of $30 million that increased this particular invoice. But as Hanford work continues, that'll definitely add value to the monthly invoicing, but probably not at that full 30 million a month level, again, which was a cumulative amount for a couple months of effort.
Brian, with regards to change orders, do you keep a ledger or some sort of schedules with regards to what comprise the change orders? What is change of scope, which is always of real interest to me on change of scope, as opposed to, but I mean, just the detail of them, change of scope, time delay, that sort of thing. Is there a schedule like that you maintain that we could look at?
I don't believe exactly as you've described. We do, of course, post on our website for the public as well our executed change orders with a description of what they are. We do look at the detail of the change orders as they're being negotiated. And, take Hanford, for example, a lot of back and forth over, quantities of units, how much steel, how much concrete, all these different factors. And, they're updated for the prices at the time of the negotiation, right? So if steel is more expensive as you're negotiating these, that gets included in the amount. So, some of these are definitely coming in higher than the, minimum or probable values that were initially estimated. But because those many factors that tie into the cost in terms of, the number of units may change, the cost per unit may change, and there's not a real strict crosswalk back to the original estimates, putting each in a bucket. But we have at times kind of ask our program folks to, indicate what primarily was the driver of the cost issues, whether it might again be inflation or a change in scope where there's more materials or a greater effort than was originally assumed.
Tom, I think to answer your broader question though as well, we do track all of the pending change orders that come in, and some of those have merit, and we make merit determinations first, whether or not we're going to pursue them, and those without merit come out. But we do, for each of the CPs, track pending change orders that are in front of us. To answer,
I think the thing that's important, or there's lots of, all of this is important, but if a change order is predicated on change in scope,
yes.
CP1 was one where
yes.
we northern extension.
Yes.
So that's commonly been referred to as a change order. It is a change order, but in change in scope, means generally we're getting more than what we thought we were going to get before, and that was the extension. And so the reaction, or that I think that both we and the people and the public have, is that that's a different kind of justification
Right.
than the challenges we have where we've got time delays. Or
Yes.
we've got the other things that Brian Annis was talking about, because inflation is a change in cost. I'm not sure I really would refer to it as a change in scope.
Yeah, just on that issue, Tom, I think it's important for the board to understand. We've had this conversation before. I'll touch on it a little bit in the broader board meeting as well. But for example, we have negotiated 12 key change orders, or are negotiating 12 key change orders, which is just the method of execution to address scope changes. But all of them are scope changes, all of them. In fact, I can tell you that virtually every structure that's been built on CP1 had a scope change from the initial awarding of the contract to the final build. And most of those, I think all of those were as a result of third-party requests for the structures to be a certain way, be it working with the city, working with the freight railroads, or others. So, yeah, I mean, the scope issues are what we're landing finally. I mean, this is where we're finally getting all the scope into the contracts, and we have to. Unfortunately, we execute those through a process called the change order, but they are tied to post-contract scope changes. And that's what we're executing now. And we're almost at the end of it on CP1. That's the good news. We're almost at the very end of it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Brian.
Sure. Brian, is some of this?
Yeah, go ahead, Ernie.
This goes to Brian Kelly. Is this some of these scope changes a result of the design build method of delivery in terms of the design changing? And since we didn't have all the total cost, and as we develop more of the project, we've changed some of the design, and those are factors that we didn't consider initially.
Yeah, Ernie, I think the chronology of getting your local agreements set early enough so you can incorporate those in the contract you let for the construction and design issues. I think a lot of these came late. The bulk of the ones I'm seeing, just to be candid, are negotiated matters between 2015 and 2018 that then we have to put into the contract and we have to execute. And so many of the things we're seeing on one are just getting the final scope issues that, again, many of them are changes. For example, the city of Fresno may have wanted on an overpass, or the utilities want on a bridge that's going over the railroads may want on a bridge that's going over the freight railroads, for example. Those all came post-contract. And so what we have done now is, finalize those designs. As you guys know, we've now designed all of the structures that we need for the 119 miles. Those scopes are included in those designs. And now it's about executing the contract to make sure they're incorporated. But to answer your question, most of them are post contract award scope changes, mostly pushed by third parties that we work with.
Okay. Thank you.
To Ernie's point, I think if we did a design bid build, you might not eliminate them all, but you're going to eliminate the majority of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly say that by the time you've designed that fully and you're the designer, you will want to have incorporated all of the local agreements into what you're doing, and you want to find that in the scope.
Absolutely. I think, going forward, obviously, that's the way we have to go.
Hey, thank you, Jim. Go ahead, Brian.
Sure. And there was just one more thing on the PowerPoint, if that could come back up. There we go. The administrative positions is relatively unchanged, so I won't talk about that. But just on the federal grant summary on the bottom right, we did show here in our pending grant applications an increase because we did submit one grant application in October, and that was a $68 million grant application for a federal program called Railroad Crossing Elimination. So that's a new federal program under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that's specific to increasing safety at grade crossings where a track and a road cross at the same level. And there's, of course, those are dangerous when there's a train and car accident or a train pedestrian accident. Those are often fatal accidents. So that's a new program, and we applied for 67 million for 2 grade separations to be fully completed through construction. And those 2 are in the town of Shafter, just south of Poplar Avenue, our current construction terminus. Poplar Avenue is actually one of them for grade separation. And then in that grant, we also applied to advance through right-of-way acquisition for other grade separations through Shafter, where we're raising the current BNSF railroad on a berm, and we'll also be having high-speed rail on a berm. And there, the 4 crossings will be underneath, or will be at current grade level, and the railroads will be raised to separate them from the road traffic. So again, that's a bit of a phased approach with really parts of 6 new grade separations being applied for, and 2 of the 6 through completion. So that was submitted in early October, and that adds to our other pending applications that were submitted in May for a program that's referred to as MEGA for mega projects. And in that program, we had $1.045 billion to double track the 119 mile segment and to purchase train sets, and also for those 2 stations in the 119 mile segment, which are Fresno and Kings to Lair. So that's pending. And we also, in that mega program, had applied to advanced design on 4 of the environmental cleared segments outside the Central Valley, 2 in the Bay Area and 2 in Los Angeles, and that was $223 million. So again, three grant applications have been submitted and are pending. We think we may hear about the mega program by the end of this calendar year, and the railroad crossing elimination will presumably be sometime in the spring when that's announced. And finally, we are working on 2 additional grant applications that'll be submitted by December 1st in a federal program called CRISI, that's for railroad rehabilitation and safety projects. And in that, we're essentially asking for the remainder of the Shafter area 6 grade separation project budget, as well as that CRISI program has a workforce development category. So we're going to apply through a separate grant for the extension of the Selma Workforce Training Center to extend that program longer as well. So we again, three are in. 2 more coming soon, and we're hoping for a favorable result from the mega program in the coming month or so. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for, excuse me, everybody, any questions for Brian Ennis?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Brian.
I just want to make a comment that because Brian covered the grant process with the federal government, I just want to remind the members, and you'll probably remember this, but we went through a pretty extensive exercise of evaluating what opportunities we would have under what's called the IIJA, that federal bill that passed, and we identified over the course of the next 5 years something on the order of 70 billion in programs that we can compete in. And so you're going to hear from Brian each month and every couple months an update to our grant applications, because we're being very aggressive. And I just wanted to reiterate with the board that those 6 or 7 accounts that we identified some time ago, every time a NOFO comes out, we are in line, and we will be in line for elements of the project. The thing about our project is it's good for the bigger grants because it's obviously a huge transformative project, but there are also these distinct smaller grants that are elements of our project along the way that we will compete for. So we compete for $20 million grants. And as Brian said, we're competing for $1.3 billion grants, and we will continue to do that through the course of this program. Just wanted to remind you of that.
Thank you, Brian. Brian Annis, thank you. Then moving on to section 10, I'll just ask my colleagues, are there any questions or any comments you'd like to raise or any with regards to the Central Valley update, including the look ahead for November numbers? And if there are not, that will complete the agenda for today. So again, anything that you'd like to raise on the Central Valley update at this point, or you want to wait till the board?
I'll wait till the board.
I'll wait till the board.
Thank you, Ernie. Yeah. Okay, with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the business of this committee today. We invite you to join us again at 11 o'clock this morning for the November board meeting for the California High-Speed Rail Authority. Thank you all for attending. We appreciate your listening and at the same time your participation. The meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you, Tom.